Go live. Okay, okay. Wasn't sure. Hey, Darren, how you doing, brother? Wasn't sure how this was gonna work, but I got the stream scheduled properly, updated some of my metadata, and even because of the level of structure that I'm introducing here by actually working at a specific time, I'm postulating that maybe it's going to be good for me. So, here we are. Well, what I did was, let's see here. I went ahead and, after doing these shots yesterday, we've got a few choices here, but we've got these shots of Asher, followed by this next sequence, which is going to be nothing but fun, that involves Tianara. So I figured, okay, let's go ahead and get this Asher stuff done. Okie dokie. So, by the way, just a point which I kind of wish Amar was here because this is something that would maybe be of interest. I was wrong about OBS as far as none of my settings being changed. Well, actually, within OBS... Waiting. Okay, so... Okay. Okay, so the one change from yesterday... well, I should say the change yesterday from the day before was that I had the YouTube Studio set to ultra low latency, not high or medium latency. For whatever reason, yesterday that seemed to be a bit of a win. Nothing else was changed on the OBS side. Now today, as soon as I start, it has to buffer. So you never know what you're going to get. So is Ed streaming right now as well? I need to find out what his schedule is so I'm not stepping on his toes or anyone else's, frankly. I guess if I step on AMB Animation's toes, I don't mind. I shouldn't pick on AMB. I'm not a fan. But he's certainly got a successful YouTube channel going, so you can't argue with that. Anyway, let's go back to Krita before I get myself in trouble. And come on, Darren, you know I'm not a fan of AMB. For two reasons. One is I don't actually consider him to be that talented. And what can I say? I don't consider him to be that talented. And as you know, there was one time I was watching his live stream, and there was some really obvious problems with the animation that he was using as an example that he had done that day, where the character was drifting on the ground. Okay, I mean it was a quintessential error coming from somebody who purports to be teaching animation. So in the comments, I said, your character's kind of floating a bit. And I was very nice about it. He went into a major rant about these people that chime in and want to set themselves up as some sort of an expert. I mean, he really went bananas on me. And then he banned me from his channel. So I'm like, okay. So that's, in my opinion, that's the quality of individual he is. If anybody says anything that is even slightly critical of his own work, he has a tizzy and won't let you play in his sandbox anymore. Well, to me, that's just childish. But, I do think he's an okay animator. But, I mean, let's face it, the guy's a storyboard artist, Nothing wrong with that, but... Anyway, I think he can be really mean. Well, he can, and the thing about it is that it's all ego. It's just all complete manifestation of the guy that is pretending to be super confident, super together, actually has a really fragile ego. And I think that's probably because at the end of the day, he himself knows that he's actually not that great at what he's doing. Now, when he goes, I will say this, when he goes in and does like a copy of like a Disney scene or something, he does a pretty good job. I mean, he did some stuff that looked like it was, I think, from 101 Dalmatians one time that I thought. So he definitely does some good work. And who knows, his course might be awesome. You know, his course might be excellent. I don't want to lambaste the people that create courses on YouTube, because obviously, Darren, you yourself are doing that, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're providing good information and helping people learn, yada yada yada, that's not a bad thing. So of course I'm supportive of my friends that are doing that. I just I have a cynical spot in my heart, in my mind, for people who set themselves up as so-called experts. The difference between you and A and B would be that you don't set yourself up as a great animator, you set yourself up as a great teacher of the software. Anyway, so let's get busy. What we got to do here is, I already set up these 4 shots. We've got all 4 shots of Asher, and I went ahead and swiped the background from another shot, an earlier shot with Mel, where we can safely surmise that the audience won't remember this background or draw any sort of conclusions about continuity to suggest that this background's a problem. And when you even have a situation that could be like that, usually if you just crop it in or something, it make it, or flip it, you know, just something to make it a little different. And this background happened to have a second layer alongside of it of a bird flying through, so I thought, what the heck, let's go ahead and throw the bird into this shot too. So that's that. So now we've got Asher. We probably, as a matter of policy, first want to hit Control G and put him in a group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and set up my main layers that I know I'm going to need. SHD for shadow, CLR for color, meaning ink and paint. And now I've got a choice I need to make. His mouth, I actually should have his mouth in the same layer underneath the shadow layer. So Control S as usual, save early, save often. And so the choice I'm referring to is, you can see here with Asher, we've got a number of keyframes, and essentially we're going to have to draw his body one time. And he has Zuko. We hear you over there. We hear you chirping, buddy. Basically, I'm going to have to draw his head once, and then just change the facial features. And so the question becomes, are we going to put the face on a separate layer or the same layer? I would think for this, probably a separate layer is going to be better. And so let's move this down here. Actually, why am I doing that? I had a layer already called colors, so let's just grab this. But I would like to do a proper ink job on this, I think. So let's go here, and we'll put the ink and paint on the same layer. So that means B key. We need to get our pencil, and also kind of sort of this color. Okay. Oh, there was a few yesterday? Okay. Okay. Yeah, the streaming gods are not looking with favor on me, and frankly, that's the way it goes. So I'm going to hit the Q key so I actually have a little bit of stabilization going on, and that will allow me to do this really pretty quickly. So boom, 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 boom. Fortunately, Asher's, I'm hitting GE so I can do a quick erase. And actually, let's leave a hole right there, because he kind of sort of does need a bit of a neck, I guess. Yeah, Zuko, I hear you. I don't know why you've been so chattery. Whenever I'm live streaming, you start getting all chattery, buddy. Nope, missed it. That's probably okay. Let's zip out and, yeah, that's probably okay. Gotta get his little monk cap he wears. Love the eyebrow raise that he does. Thanks. Well, I find that the by the way, stop the presses. Let me check something here. Yeah, we need to actually do this by body part. Let's call this head. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hit the S key. And actually, I'm not going to select the head. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the neck. Everything else, go XV. And we'll just call this BOD for bod. As you know, I'm always knocking myself out trying to figure out really nice 3-letter abbreviations for the stuff that I'm putting in. That way the head can be animated separately. B key, and let's turn his head off so that we can actually see what we're doing. Just smack in. He has kind of a hoodie thing going on. Yep. Okay, so, and this is just for filling purposes. So, okay, looks good. Checking my messages, no messages, that's cool. Alright, so what we're going to do is get the head colored, and then we'll go back and deal with the face and the animation. So, color-wise, Asher's got, well, frankly, a bit of an ashen color to him. He doesn't have the most vibrant flesh tone ever. And we're going to go Shift Alt Q so we're in behind mode. Just make a little mark there so that we can't go outside of the lines, and boom, we can hit the fill tool. That's a little too brown. Let's make that a little bit more saturated. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, sometimes just because of the way Krita handles the image buffers, you have to hit the you got to hit the fill tool repeatedly. It's just the nature of the beast. But now I hit the G key, and since we're still in behind mode, I can go like that, and it's going to fill in those little corners. Took half a second. No big deal. Okay, so now we're on his head, as I said, and we're going to grab our outline color, back to our pencil, and we don't want to be in behind mode. We want to be in normal mode now. Okay, and I'm looking at what's going to change and what's not going to change. Okay, this is not going to change. Yeah, frankly, really, that's not going to change either. So I'm going to go ahead and put in some of this action. And now let's go to the bod. Let's just sample the flesh tone. Fill that in. See that? That's, oops. Undo, 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 undo. Got to be in behind mode there, folks. Now you can also be in color mode, but for reasons I won't exactly get into because the nuance of it is a little bit weird. Being in color mode, long story short, is the first time you apply it, it works. Whoops, I'm supposed to be in erase mode here, folks. And then afterwards it doesn't. So, all right, what color are we making Asher's cloak? It seems to me that I had made a decision about that right back here. And let's just go. Yeah, it's kind of a real muted grayish bluish. So hitting the old S key to save our work. We've still got the bod here, so let's go with a muted. Look at that. Oh, I love it. Fill this. Whoops. What the heck did I just do? Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'm in difference mode by accident. Or as we say in Indiana, which is not where I grew up. Oh, doggone it. That's not what I want either. On accident. I don't know what you say in England, but I when something happened accidentally, I say it happened by accident. And here in Indiana, and my kids, because they grew up here, they don't say by accident, they say on accident. Yeah, that was on accident. Which always seemed like very strange terminology to me. If you don't insert a keyframe on that first frame or somewhere so that Krita knows this is an animated layer, then what'll happen is you'll go to a later position, move stuff around, and then realize you changed the whole layer. It isn't relegated to a you say by accident too, okay, or accidentally, right, okay. Well, that seems like the right way for me, but yeah, what do I know? Okay, so now we see a bit of a problem with the neck, so we'll just deal with the body thusly. Let's go to the bod. Just for kicks and giggles, we'll insert a key here, and I'm just going to correct this with the liquify tool. I'm just going to move that over like that and say we're good to go. Okay, now change an expression, and then he sits back up. So therefore, we'll put this body back here, and then I believe we can actually just copy this body, or this head, I mean, to here. So I'm hitting Control when I drag that around. That's it. Okay. So double checking here my tweens. Bop, bop. Yeah, actually, that's true. It moved a little bit more. So here in the head layer, I'm going to go right there. And I really want just a regular free transform. Nothing too fancy here, folks. And it looks like we got a little bitty ditty we're going to have to clean up. Right there. Okay. One of the flaws in Krita actually is that this dark gray line tells you that the animation stuff is cached in memory. The algorithm that Krita uses to update that cache is such that the result it gives you is almost always the complete opposite of what you would want. In other words, everything is cached in memory, ready to play back, ready to show accurately, except the frames you just change, which are the ones you want to review. So what you have right here is you start seeing frames that don't update properly. The only cure for that is you have to hit play, and then as you can see, it all just updated. Dumber than a box of rocks, but hey, it's what you get. So let's go here on the head layer, move that to there, and obviously we got a little bit of cleanup we're going to have to do here on his neck, and that's just carelessness on my part. I think the solution for that would be to take the head layer, take the G key, get a little flesh tone going on like that, and just, well, we'll just clean that up. And here we'll do a little erase mode like that. Back out of erase mode. So sometimes what I find is this is actually the price you pay for animating in Krita, is you have to do these little patches and cleanups, but they always take like seconds, and what you get in exchange for that is a lot of power and flexibility in terms of just intuitively working with the cells. That's why you see me baking down my animation all the time. Because flattening it down to a single layer and then having to recut it apart, I don't mind, you know. Usually turns out that that's actually quicker. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and just put his eyes on another layer. It's not strictly necessary, but what the heck. So I'm going to grab my typical ink color. It looks like my stabilizer's still on. Generally, if I'm doing traditional inking, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, depends on the shot, but if I'm doing traditional inking, I tend to favor having the stabilizer on. Okay. And let's look at his mouth layer. We really need to have a mouth here. Okay, undo that. The mouth needs to be done with black. Like so. It is actually, admittedly, a slightly different color from the regular outline, but I don't think that's something anyone's going to really notice. Okay, so now we're going to go into the eyes layer, hit GE, so we're doing a lasso erase. Need to make sure I grab that color. Hello. I guess when I sample a color, that makes it opaque again. So now I need to make a little amendment. Well, I guess technically I wanted the brush anyway, not the freehand path tool for the actual eyebrows. So that's fine. Okay, so now we need to just insert a key. Again, this is one of those cases where it's probably faster just to redraw it than to use the... Gives it a little bit of life too when things change slightly, you know, between frames. I'll deal with the mouth later. Insert, yeah, 1, 2, 3. So I'm kind of allowing myself to make some improvements as I go. Oh, itch on my nose. Okay, this one I think I'm going to just animate. And this one I'm not. This one I'm going to go GE because his brows are ending up in a wrong, or in a different position. Actually, okay, sorry. I didn't realize his eyes were open. Closed, open. Okay, so BE. 1, 2, 3. Boom, boom. Kindly old Asher. Boom. Okay, checking, hey Max Power, by accident, good morning, hey, okay. One thing I don't necessarily love right here is in his head, his nose seems to be in a bit of a, okay, I didn't mean to do that. In a bit of a strange position. This needs to be in normal mode, so we can just lasso that, and then, sorry, didn't mean to hit the erase mode. Okay, I think we're pretty close. Okay, I see we need to animate the mouth. And obviously get the color in his eyes as well, so... Right there. Boom. Okay, so we've got this lead in. I'm gonna check this. Yeah, I would say let's just go to the mouth layer, hit the A key, and just kind of slide that into position. Boom. So I'm just going to jump between these animation keys on the mouth and see if anything jumps out as being problematic. Okay, so we're going to have to do shadows, and we need to do the whites of his eyes. So let's go to Eyes, Layer. Let's grab the freehand path tool, go to white, but then slightly not quite white. Alright, in behind mode. And this is going to be just a sliver, baby. Just a sliver. Whoops, that's not quite right. That's a little aggressive too, frankly. Yep, that looks good. So I'm kind of using the fact that the, well, you'll see right here. Watch this. Boom. Okay, because the shape I draw gets filled, it kind of does that top line for me, which is pretty cool. Now his eyes seem a little light, but I think we'll go with it. Now what I want to do, you checking my messages, appreciate your streaming more often. Thanks, man. I don't mind. I'm kind of experimenting with the idea that that's helping me maybe be a little more disciplined. Now there is actually a problem here. Something I just realized. Yep, we got a problem with his head. What we're going to do now, let me see. Let me think about how I want to do this. Because I really don't want to change the beard outline. So I might have to fiddle with blending modes. What I'm getting at is that if we go back here on his head, let's see. What we really need is essentially this beard color that's going to be slightly darker than like his eyes. I'm going to go back here and yeah, okay. So why don't we do it this way? I think might be, I'm going to turn the stabilizer off. I'm just going to go to luminosity. Maybe it's color. Actually, color might be what I want. Okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to turn on alpha lock and then use the freehand path tool. And we're doing colors, so yep, that did it. Ah, nice. That's where color mode is useful, because behind mode doesn't work because it's already filled in. But now I can just lasso this and fix his beard on all these cells, which is awesome. Well, again, this is one of the reasons why I use Krita, is because little things like that involve blending mode adjustments are, they come up a lot. Now, admittedly, in this case, it's because of my own carelessness. And then the cool thing is, you got to realize everything I'm doing right now in Asher, I got 1, 2, 3 more shots where I'm going to be able to reuse probably 80% of this. So, all right, Asher. One thing I'm wondering. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually make a little adjustment, and I'm going to kind of do this the hard way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select by color. Is that select by color? Yep. I'm going to take the similar color selection and actually create a selection. Then I'm going to hit Control M. I'm going to raise that value up just a little bit. Okay? Now what I can do, you see, Krita's got a little bit of a disconnect because here the head layer is selected and here it's showing me the eyes layer selected. So that is absolutely 100% a bug. That is not supposed to be happening. All right. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select that and hit Control F, so it simply repeats the same curves tool that I just used, and deal with shadows. So let's save our work, save early, save often, and now I want to go back here. As you can see, Mel's kind of, yeah, the sun is basically going to be coming from Asher's right side, stage left. Right. And I think we'll put a rim light on him too, the way I did with Mel, just because it looks super cool. So let's go ahead and go to the shadow layer. I want to see if we have a key. Nope, we don't. So let's insert a key. We want free. It doesn't make sense to do a broad. In other words, this is what I was contemplating. Should I just go ahead and put him like in a broad layer of shadow? Actually, I think I will. So instead of doing the rim light per se, the way I did with Mel, I think I'll just go ahead and give him a broad shadow situation. So let's go ahead and just put that in there, and then we'll go back and add a second layer of shadowing. Okay, and then here what we're going to do is just maybe a little bit there. That looks a little bit winky. I wish Krita would remember my settings on that tool, because I use the tool constantly, and if you go and use a different tool and then this should be a repeat of that. Yeah, okay. So this is the main shadow layer, but let's add a second shadow layer. I usually call those SHD2. Insert a key. And now what I'm going to do is actually do more of the proper / traditional type shadow work that I tend to do. Boom. A little bit under the neck. Probably even more. Maybe like that. Boom, boom. Don't like that. I probably want to get a little bit more of a curve there. Okay. Now we can lighten that up and ease it back in. It's kind of like EQ or doing a mix with music. You want to kind of ease in your changes and then quickly turn them back off and back on to sort of what we call doing an A/B test. Okay, there's the shadow. And now the question is, can we fudge this? Rather than trying to fudge it, what I'm going to do is just erase this part and redraw that part. So Zuko, you are being very, very vocal today. What's up with you, handsome man? The African gray parrot is Mr. Interpolation today. Okay, that's interesting. We really want that in there. And I think... Oh, I see. That's in the other shadow layer. Okay, well, that's fine. We'll go with it. And same situation here. Just hitting erase mode. I'm reminded by programs such as an open source program. Blender do it too. I use Blender, OpenToonz, and Krita. But in practice, for most situations, most of the time, Krita does the job. So that's me. Others have different opinions about that. Probably don't want that there, actually. Morning, Val. Looks like Val's up. I might have to duck out and go hang out with Val for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and say good morning, and then come back. So what I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to do that very thing. But what I'm going to do is get myself kind of, sort of to the point where this is going to be pretty much ready to render, and then I'm going to duck out for a couple minutes and come back. And what's going to happen here... Okay, actually that looks pretty good. Let's let it play. I think we can turn off the... where's the... That's this right here. Okay, let's let that play. And there's a few things I might want to massage about it, but basically it's pretty good. So what we're going to be able to do here, what's coming up next, is I'm going to go ahead and take what I can of Asher and copy him and the background into these other 4 shots. So I need to get all 4 of these shots done. And at this point, I think that's looking pretty good. That will balance nicely against this this shot of Mel. Okay, I'm ducking out for 2, maybe 3 minutes. Be back in a flash. Well, I suppose the question is, did anybody bail? It doesn't look like it. Okay, I'm back. One wonders if there should be some snow on top of those mountains. Probably simpler is better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make some slight adjustments. Again, saving early and saving often. Couple adjustments to his shadow. And then I was considering maybe taking a vote. Okay, and what would the vote be? The vote would be, do I keep knocking out these shots of Asher? Because frankly, I don't care. It's all got to get done. Plenty of oh, no new messages. Okay. So keep working on Asher. Looks like, yeah, that's okay. Or jump forward to here, in which case I'd be working on the background painting. It's your call, folks. You decide. You weigh in on what you want to see. And of course, if anyone has questions about just about anything, feel free. Okay, I need to render this baby. I just hit Control R. It's already set to 273. So there it is. And basically, by the time I jump back to Vegas, it's already updated, just like magic. And Asher says his line. And yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. So, but again, these shots are going to be just variations of what I just did. So I can either do that or background painting. You got 1 minute to vote. If nobody votes, I'm going to just keep going with what I'm doing. Okie dokie. Having said that, file, save. Okay, so this is the Asher group. Integrate with Vegas. Well, what Vegas does, okay, background. Okay, Jim wants to see background. Yeah, well, what happens is Vegas, I've been using Vegas for 20 years, okay? So that's why I edit with Vegas. Not a free program. For the record, if you're looking for a really simple but pretty capable, surprisingly capable free program, it would be, for me, would be OpenShot. OpenShot, which I use OpenShot Portable on Windows, is actually quite good, but color correction is quite limited. You basically just have brightness and contrast. Why did you choose to move your webcam? Dude, because. I don't really remember what the reason was. Actually, I do. The reason was because I was doing a Zoom call with fam, or have them on the slightly bigger and slightly sharper screen. So the reason was for Zoom calls. All right. Well, Jim says, yeah, well, you know what, Walter, I tell you what, DaVinci Resolve is an incredibly capable program. I would say more so even than Vegas, but for about at least a 5-year period of time, every single time I've ever tried to install and use the next version of DaVinci, it has experienced crashes right out of the gate, like immediately didn't work. And I just didn't want to spend tons of time figuring that out when I have multiple films and all that I've been using Vegas for so many years. It's just so what I was going to say about Vegas is, I'll say two things. Number one, it references your video files and whatnot on the hard drive. So because of that, if you change them, it just updates. So that's kind of nice. And the other thing about Vegas is you can use nested shots, which means I could actually create a multi-track shot in Vegas and then drag that Vegas file into another Vegas timeline. And again, it all updates live, and it allows you to actually right mouse click on the shot and open that one in Vegas if you need to make changes. So it's pretty well integrated, much in the way that I suppose Fusion, I think, integrates with DaVinci, right? So yeah, HitFilm I've used as well, and it's definitely very good. That's what Ed Tadeo uses. Um, for reasons I won't get into, I didn't exactly love it. Again, I won't get into all the reasons why, but in a nutshell, HitFilm doesn't really have much that I don't already have in Vegas. So, all right, so we'll jump to the background. No problem. All right, so I'm gonna save this, and probably the prudent pathway here is I'm gonna go ahead and save these. I'm basically going to take a chance that maybe at some point Krita will crash, and hopefully it won't. But what I'm going to do is just take the background situation from the storyboard and drag it into Krita so that I know what to paint. Okay, so where are we here? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to drag this into Krita. Okay, so I'm going to actually do this at the size that it is, because the idea is that I'm going to basically be on an HD frame that's going to wind up cropping in essentially to broadcast HD. Let's see. I think actually if I put the background in multiply mode, I can have it over top. And so let's just kind of see what happens here. How are we going to do this? Well, why don't we get a sky in there first? Yep. And why don't we get a little bit of earth in there second? Yeah, sure enough, this stupid thing always switches to curve interpolation. And we don't want to be in color mode. We want to be in normal mode. That explains why that didn't take. Okay. Now, right. You know Vegas so well, you know its bugs. Yeah, and like I said, I've been using Vegas for 20 years, so there's kind of a path here. Not too bad. Okay, so now the question becomes, how many layers do we want to get into? I'm going to go ahead and save this. Save. And that gives me the option, because it has multiple layers, to also save it as a Krita file. So now it's basically ready to go for not only saving as Krita, but also now the thumbnail in my storyboard automatically got updated to look like this instead of like this. But because this layer is in here, I can always refer back to it. Okay, I'm not going to mess around with Tianara. Kyle just sneezed. Okay. So now it's kind of just a strategy choice, I would say. I'm going to grab this color and then just go to a little bit darker shade, hit the brush, and whoops, somewhat non-intuitively, a lot of times people tend to think that the sky goes from, like, you would think as it goes towards the ground it would get darker, and in fact it's usually the opposite. Because of atmospheric perspective, it actually gets lighter towards the ground, and that makes sense because the sun is actually down below the horizon ostensibly. Alright, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and put my I'm going to go ahead and mute that for the moment. And let's grab maybe some of these and make them pure white. That looks pretty good. Style that in maybe about to there-ish. And then I will reserve the possibility of actually animating the clouds as well. Okay, how do you get that color and tool menu to pop up? Right mouse. You hit the right mouse button and there it is. And I did not use this, I mean, like for more than a year. I found it annoying when I accidentally hit the right mouse button and didn't really use it. But I ultimately embraced it because it does give me all my brushes, my palette, so all the colors that are currently in use in the shot are appearing here, plus I got my color selector, which meant I could free up all that real estate on the screen so I don't have to have my brushes or my colors on screen. The only downside to it is I wish you could hit escape and have it go away. Actually, you have to click once to make it go away. Not a big deal, but just not necessarily my preference. Okay, so let's see what we want to do here. Well, let's turn this down a bit so it's just kind of faintly there as a guide. And the main thing I'm seeing here, let's grab that and then maybe our sort of quintessential foliage brush. And I think I'll block in what foliage we have. Okay, let me think about this for a minute. Actually, I'm going to stop, back up a couple steps. We're going to have to do a bunch of color work on the building, so it probably would be prudent to put the foliage on another layer as well for the moment, just so that we know we're going to be able to paint under it without it, causing a problem. Okay, and then over here, just kind of give it a little bit of color variation, and then get back to the building, and I'm just going to go BLDG for building, save my work, save. Looking for any questions? Okay, no questions, so we're good. Alright, think about this for a moment. Here on the paint layer, I would say maybe just a little bit of variation here would be good. I'm not necessarily looking for sort of your quintessential anime style background painting. I'm tending on this project to favor a little bit more simplified approach. So I'm not really trying to, make this as detailed, I suppose, as you might want in a different kind of cartoon. But so I'm going to jump around a bit. Let me sample that color, and now I'm just going to hit well, actually I need to make sure I have the right brush. Important point about that is if you use the freehand path tool, it applies the path, the shape you draw, with whatever brush you have selected. So if the brush was the foliage brush, then any shape I draw like that is actually going to have that foliage texture all around it. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to think about this for a minute. We probably want to have a slight color variation. I'm just going to grab a blue and turn our opacity way down. Let's just see. Yeah, by having the opacity down, I can go ahead and tint these a little bit, just to give them some color variety. Okay. Now I'm going to go to white, and since that seems to be kind of sort of working, I'm going to go ahead and just keep going with the semi-opaque. That was, I don't mind if it's a little loosey-goosey, because, it is a cartoon, but I don't want to be too sloppy, and I think what I'm going to do is just add some kind of some noise to suggest some sort of decorative stuff on the building. Okay. Presumably, if the sun is shining, we're going to be getting... Let's see. What direction would we want the sun shining? It looks to me like we're going down here, so that'll probably be okay. Not a big deal. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and actually go to black here. Like I said, keeping it somewhat loose. And I reserve the right to fail, you know. Yeah, it might turn out that the background painting doesn't wind up being as awesome as I hoped, but okay. Here we've got a fairly large, I would say, arched doorway situation, and let's crank up the opacity a little bit more and give this some windows. We'll give the, actually, let's turn the opacity down a little bit more. And so this is kind of how I've been doing a lot of the backgrounds, is very well, like I said, loose-ish. A little bit cartoony. And I'm going to say there's some sort of little bit of overhang there on the oh, that's probably a little bit too much. And here's the difference between this and real paint, is you've got undo. Probably not too shabby. So I want to put these borders on top and then smack in this. Will keep real kind of sketchy. Just enough to suggest. And the nice thing about using opacity is that you can lay it in very loosely and it builds up on itself. This one, I think I'm just going to add a little bit of something. This is all just illusion to kind of trick your mind into feeling like there's something there when there really isn't. Not horrible. I'll crank the opacity back up and just really hit that specular highlight on the lip. Even more, I think. Okay, now I'm going to hit the E key and just chisel that back out. Oh, that didn't work. That makes sense. That's because the rough for the... Oops, I can't do that. Sorry. I got to go like this and lay in the sky color. Okay. A little bit of poor planning there, sir. Poor planning. Okay, so now what I'm going to do actually is even drive this home a little bit more. Why? No particular reason, actually. Let's go. Nah, I don't like that. And this guy definitely needs some sort of something. Okay, now I'm going to actually, boom, I'm going to bake the building into it. I am going to bake the foliage into it. So I'm sort of flattening out and committing to it. I struggle with adding texture, so my backgrounds often look really flat. My backgrounds are not amazing. Wow. Thank you, sir. The key thing is you have to visualize in your mind the actual dimensionality of it. You've got to see the 3D volume, and then that suggests where to put shadows. And what you find is just a little bit of specular highlight drives home the dimensionality of it. So, I mean, obviously this is actually really, really loose. Very sloppy. But that was kind of a choice to say this really doesn't particularly matter, right? But if you wanted to drive home these, so let's just go ahead and let's clean this up. Okay, so we're going to clean it up by basically just drawing a shape across there, and now let's draw a shape across there, and now we have the windows at least kind of sort of relatively in the same size. Well, if I switch to my brush, okay, and then I'm gonna go with, and we'll just go with a little off-white, not quite white, but obviously if the sun's shining here, it's gonna pick up a little bit like this, right? So you want to be thinking about that. I'm not a particularly great painter, not at all. But what I've been finding, especially with actual painting with paint, is that if you just think about what the actual 3D volumes would be, what's really there, it kind of tells you what you need to do. So right there we'll say, yeah, of course that's going to pick up. If the sun's shining down this way, right, then some of this stuff is going to be picking up the sun. Maybe even the doorknob would pick up a little bit, right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Okay. Yeah, I mean background painting is truly a lot of fun. It's a very zen process that you sort of get into. I mean, what we're seeing here is kind of stupid in the sense that you've got what amounts to some sort of windows or something that, but yet we're seeing this stonework run right through it, right? So it's kind of silly. But again, if the sun's coming down this way, then of course you're going to get a little bit of a shadow there. You're going to get a little bit of a tightness here, but then because of the ambient light bouncing around, you know, you're going to get the harder edge. And then you could even drive that home a little bit if you wanted to by saying, well, this is stonework, so let's go ahead and give the stonework just a little bit of a lip. Just a little lip like that. Right? So it's just catching the sun. And when you zoom out, you see that it looks like it's got some dimensionality to it. So it's like so many things with art. It turns out the things that actually make it look cool are kind of non-intuitive. You see this a lot with what I've with the wildlife painting. Let me be so bold as to throw up an example. Where's my kitty picture? I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, with the kitty picture, what's important about this when you're painting is it actually consists of very flat planes of color. So it's really about the planes, and especially in the guy's face. So if you look at his face, you can really see it. There's a strong temptation to blend, But the reality is that usually nothing has, it's actually very, very rare that you see smooth gradations of color in anything, actually. What you see is flat planes, and so what you learn to do is you learn to, like, for example, in painting this, as I'm looking at my reference, I'm actually seeing this shape. So what's going to get you in trouble, this is the most helpful thing I can tell you, is you're not going to see these shapes. You're going to see an eye, or you're going to see a nose. And then what you're going to want to do is draw or paint a mental representation of what a nose is. And that will always cause you to do a very poor job. Whereas if you focus in on the shapes and get the shapes right and their positions relative to each other, the animal or the whatever it is you're painting will just emerge. It'll just appear because those planes of color are there. Another thing that would be helpful probably for a lot of people is, if you're going to go down that road and try it, is limit your focus way more on value than hue. Okay, so the color doesn't actually matter that much. The values matter a lot. So if you want to cheat that, which you can do when you're painting digitally, just paint it in black and white. And not only paint it in black and white, but limit yourself to only, I don't know, 6 or 8 different value levels. Only give yourself 6 or 8 different values that you're allowed to paint with. So you have to decide, you have to simplify it. If you want to cheat, then you could take a photo reference, and I think in Krita, let me see, probably the filter would be, I'm guessing, colors. No, I think it'd be adjustment. No, artistic. Posterize. You want to posterize your picture so that you tell your software, let's say I only want 8 different levels of tone. If you do this to a photograph and reduce it to a very few levels of tone, then it makes it like a paint by numbers situation. And that can be quite helpful in teaching you to see shapes. You don't want to see objects. You don't want to see recognizable objects. If you're seeing recognizable objects, you're not seeing correctly. And painting is not about painting or rendering a thing. It's about seeing. If you can see the shapes, just paint the shapes. The thing you're trying to paint will just emerge automatically. Or as I like to say, automagically. It really does. And so then what happens is you learn to trust your own ability to see. You trust that as long as I get the shapes right, I'll get the picture right. And what I found is more and more, as I've been actually delving back into traditional painting, I've found that that actually has proven to be the case. So, anyway, that's my little spiel on painting, for those who might be interested. So this is all just choices. I mean, I could leave this more simple. It doesn't really much matter. Okay, but I'm not happy with the foliage situation. So now let's start getting down and dirty and making this look better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just give myself a little darker tone and go back to my foliage brush. Boom. Okay. And then what can I say? You want to be judicious and somewhat sensitive to what you're seeing. You know, in this case, do I want to actually say, well, maybe there's some vines and whatnot that sneak their way up the building? Yeah, why not? Why not? This is an older building. Carlina or Carliana, I can't remember what name I gave her, has been operating in the Northlands for many, many years. She's very rich. Her compound has been in place for quite some time. And again, what you find is that, like for this, Okay, I'm going to cheat this a little bit. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and lay in the shadow-ish area, and then grab the highlight again, just sample it, and smack back over top of it. And that gives me, you know, the sun is kind of hitting the foliage and creating these areas of shadow. So when I've seen people do this kind of stuff, I'd always kind of marvel at, geez, you know, they did that so quick. You know, and when it looks good, you know, and you go, man, how can it be so easy? And the reality is it actually is that easy. If you try to paint every leaf, you're really pissing in the wind, because the thing you got to ask yourself is, what do my eyes actually see? They don't see leaves. They just see an arbitrary shape, and your brain tells you that it's leaves. What you need to paint is the shape, or the idea, or the feeling of it, and let your viewer's brain do the work. Boom. Okay, another thing, by the way, especially with animation, that's quite helpful is, this is actually hugely important. You generally want to do something like this. Boom. Right? Just something in the foreground really drives it home. That makes such a bit of variation. Let's see, I'm going to look at my messages. What are the hotkeys to make the brush larger and smaller? Well, okay, so let me back up a little bit. Darren, what you're saying about watching people, I agree completely. I'm a very visual learner, and what I find is, if I can just see somebody do it one time, I usually can begin to be able to do it, whatever it is. What I found frustrating with animation, and especially with you know, your bigger animation properties, like the thing you're never going to find online is, which would be so cool, is some video from, say, Pixar or whatever, where you literally can just watch the person really truly doing their job for an hour. You would learn more from that, and of course they always hide that. All the behind the scenes stuff always paints this picture of oh, this person is so creative, you know, our director's so amazing, everything's happy. It's all ridiculous. It's comically stupid. The world is not like that, and creating media is not like that. It's grunt work, man. And they always try to paint this picture, which of course the kids that want to see the show believe it. You know, they believe it's just this endless happiness. No, not even close. Now the thing that I do have a bit of a problem with here. Okay, so now Jim asked about hotkeys. I don't have a hotkey. What I do is, on my stylus, I click the middle mouse button to move, and I hit Control middle mouse button to zoom. So that's it. If I need to rotate, it is Shift middle mouse button, and then the 5 key, the number 5 across the top of the keyboard, resets the zoom. Now, the thing I'm seeing here, it's a bit problematic, is I don't really like that. So this is where my inability is going to become more evident. I'm looking at and thinking about the fact that this feels a little too plain, and I'm wanting more variety in it. Now remember, in the background, in the actual scene, we're going to have Tianara, and then Balder is going to be walking into frame. So what I probably should do here, I think, is let's get the rock in there. I'll just sample this color and steal it. Let's see, just use my standard pencil with this color, but then switch to the oops, I just put that on the wrong layer. Silly me. Okay, and actually I did that a lot. Okay, that's a little problematic. Let me think about this for half a second. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. This will solve the problem quite nicely, I think. I'm going to solo this layer, hit the S key. This is, again, this is a Krita-ism that's so nice. I'm just going to go Control X, Control V. Now the clouds are in their own layer. And now we can take this layer and what I could do is bake it down, but what would actually be smarter, let me go back here. Yeah, I mean, okay. I kind of made a strategic error here by putting the foreground not in its own layer. Let's just redo it. Of course, that's easier said than done. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to really, really cheat. This is what you do when you get yourself in a pickle. What I'm actually going to do is simply get rid of these clouds that are over here. Sorry, boom. And hello, I need my brush, I need my clouds, and I need to be in erase mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to sell the idea that the clouds are sort of moving in from, oh, I like that. I like that. Probably should add a little bit of opacity. Put a little hole in the cloud. So now I'm thinking possibly I'm going to have a very slight animation of the clouds, so they're moving just a little bit. And if I really wanted to protect my my foreground, I'd move them this way, not that way, so they're not bumping into that tree. So it's a stupid problem to have, but you know, these sorts of things happen all the time. You just learn how to work around them. Okay, I'm gonna go back over here and look at the messages. I agree with paint what you actually see instead of painting what you think you see. It was a good day when I heard the advice about not drawing from your mental images thing, not draw, but draw from reference. Okay, and one of the ways you can practice that is by doing what's called a contour drawing. What you do with a contour drawing, which can be either a blind contour drawing or not. And what you do is you look at something you want to draw and you force yourself. I learned this in college actually. What you do is you draw what you're seeing. You draw the contours of what you're seeing, and you're not allowed to lift your pencil up. You have to leave it down. So it teaches you, and I wouldn't say it's a hugely beneficial exercise, but I think for most people it would be good to at least try it, because you can't draw symbols. When I talk about drawing what you think you see or what's in your mind, it's what my high school art teacher told me was drawing symbols. You're not drawing what you see. You're drawing symbols in your brain of what you think what you see means. And usually what it means is that's a person, or that's what I'm looking at right now, which is a Wi-Fi router, right? You really don't want to draw symbols. Okay, so the problem I have right now is I want to put a little bit of a background on the compound. So I'm going to try this way. Okay, we've got this noise, which I think we can bake down. We just need to have the clouds on a separate layer. And then what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go to a different layer, and I'm kind of learning as I go on this one. What I'm going to do is hit the G key and just think about what I would want to have in there in terms of expanding the compound a bit. Okay? And then we'll see if I can actually make this work with blending modes. So now I have to sort of go through my blending modes and see if I was thinking maybe darken. Okay, so now this is an interesting question. If a layer is reduced in opacity, does it affect the application of the blending mode? Not really. So if I do darken was kind of what I was thinking. And it looks like that actually worked. Yes, that worked. darken was right. Okay, so what did I just do? What I did was I said I'm going to use a midtone for these buildings in the background such that they will be lighter than the building but darker than the sky, and therefore they'll only show up because of darken mode. Hey, Inyo-san. What filters, blurs, and moves can you do on a group of layers at one time? Whatever you want. The way to do it, Jim, is like this. Okay, let's just say for the sake of a stupid example that I wanted to add a color cast. Well, actually, it's not a stupid example. A color cast to your whole shot is actually a really common thing to want to do. What you do is you grab your layers that all need to be affected by a common filter, hit Control G, put them in a group, and then grab the group, and then with the case of curves you hit Control M and the curves tool. Where is it? Control M. Hello? I guess it doesn't want to pop up with the hotkey if you do it on a group. But what you do is you can add a filter mask, which happen to be by default a curves, and now the filter gets applied to everything. Okay? And because it's a filter mask, it's procedural, which means I can change the settings at any time and I can turn them on and off. I actually like what that's doing to my shot. I'm actually thinking I'm going to keep that around, but I'm not going to apply it at this point. Okay? Having said that, there's generally a better way to make modifications to a whole scene, especially if it involves color, than using a filter. A filter is actually generally a bad idea. What is a much better idea would be to do something like this. Just add a paint layer, and then, for lack of a better idea, I'll just airbrush over this whole thing. Okay? Alright? And then I'm just going to try different blending modes. Probably overlay is going to be my best choice. And as you can see, actually, by some astonishing, miraculous coincidence of the universe, it actually turns out that a black airbrushing in overlay mode gives you a result darn similar to what I got with the curves tool. So they're both valid ways to do color adjustments. But in terms of stability and animatability, you're way better off to work with layers because you can animate their opacity over time, for example. So it fades in. If you wanted to show that the sun is setting, you know, you could actually animate this. You could just animate these changes over time so you see it getting darker, that sort of thing. So in my case, I'm going to actually get rid of the filter mask and keep the layer. And then at any time, by just turning it up or down, it kind of becomes a global tweak for my background painting. So save that. Now again, remember in this shot, one of the things we were wanting to do is initially the audience is going to see roughly this, and it's going to be a slow push into about like that. That's why we have the frame in there. So just something to keep in mind. Now what is this? Okay, that's those background guys. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is actually add, I think I'll break my own rule and add let's say add a filter mask to that. Yeah, see what happens. Now this is what I was saying earlier. I was saying, does the opacity of the layer affect the way it blends with the other layers? And the answer was no. So it's going to blend the way it's going to blend, but then you're just turning the opacity up or down. But what you can see here is the opposite is taking place. If I add a filter so that the actual colors get darker, watch what happens. It begins to actually bleed over top of the other layer, right? So using a filter mask on this darken layer is not the greatest idea I've ever had. But what I could do, I'm just going to again experiment a bit, is I'm going to put it in a group and I'm going to try the filter layer again. Okay, so now this is important. Let's make this normal, but make the group darken mode. Okay? Now my question is, what if I do the same thing and I'm still getting the same result? So I want to think about this one. I don't actually know what the best answer is offhand. But what I want to do is effectively chisel this out. Obviously I could fix it by painting it. Why don't I do that? That would actually be the fastest solution. Okay, so here's how I do that. I'm going to hit the E key rather than fight with this. For what I want to do here is actually hit the G key in erase mode and just chisel back out the problem. Just hide the problem. Okay, that was bad. Actually, the solution there is to just turn the opacity of it down so I can kind of go like this. Okay. So sometimes I get myself in a pickle, and the solution, of course, is to know how to get yourself back out of a pickle. Okay. So now this color adjustment, which I'm not happy with, used to be if you hit F3 it would let you adjust the properties. But what I want to do here is, by the way, this is an interesting thing in Krita as well, is you'll find that the color adjustment curves are really, really powerful because you can change way more than the color. For example, in this case, it would probably be useful to turn the alpha down. Whoops. Okay, reset. Hello. Turn the alpha down so that some of that blue from the sky is actually allowed to bleed in. Okay. However, having said that, I'm going to reset that, by the way, but I still want it to be darker. So I turned the alpha down, and now I've lost my green, and I want to see if I can bring a little bit of that back by doing a color curves on the saturation. And again, because it's a filter mask, you can go back and change it any time. Now what I'm going to do in this case is bake it down. Got to be bold. All right, I'm going to go back here and check out. Everyone's streaming today. Oh boy, I've missed a bunch of stuff. Hello to everyone else. Everyone's streaming, chat, blah blah blah. New Year's, yeah, man. It's new. Happy New Year, buddy. Okay, so all the niceties. I didn't actually technically miss much. So what I'm going to do now is make some adjustments to this. I want this to be fairly actually, let's just turn the opacity down, sample a darker color so that I can just kind of, ooh, that's too strong. Well, wait a second. You know what? That looks pretty good, actually. I do want it to be a little less distinct, but let's just go ahead and run with that. I like that actually a lot. Surprise, surprise. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And this one, I think I'm going to try to leave it. I'll give it a little bit of texture here on the roof, which because of the opacity means that texture is going to be a little bit lighter. But I want to kind of leave that vague, if you will. I'm just thinking I just want to suggest that this compound is kind of like got more going on than it appears at first glance, because it is supposed to be, as I say, a compound for somebody who's really rich and has a lot of land and a lot of buildings and stuff. TNR is wicked mother, not stepmother, by the way. She is not a stepmother. She's just a mother. And, well, how would you feel if you were TNR? Your mother announces to you in the next sequence, in the sequence that begins Okay, that was not good. In the sequence that begins with this background painting, TNR is going to find out that she's being married off. So it's no wonder the girl's not in a good mood. The background is turning out great. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Okay. So we still haven't gotten around to the rock yet, but so you can see just by winging it, just scribble, you know, and kind of what you learn is how to be sensitive to when it's working and when it's not working. I would not say that I'm great at it. All right, I'm going to actually switch to this brush here. Okay. And I really want it to be kind of large, and let's just go with half opacity. Nope, that's not even enough. I'm going to turn it way down. Enough transparency is what I meant. So a lot of times, by the way, if you're going to paint or draw or whatever, remember to squint. If you squint, you reduce your eye's ability to detect color, and it makes whatever you're looking at look simpler and more you know, you just see the values more clearly. By the way, I'm going to grab a little bit there as well. Okay, so I don't feel like I nailed that exactly, so let's just kind of soften that up a bit. Alright, so now let's make an adjustment with our foliage again. What I want to do, again, I'm going to go about half opacity. But the idea is just to remember, everything picks up shadows. Okay, saving my work. How are we doing on time here? Boy, whoa, dudes, I've been streaming for 3 hours. This is insane. All right, let's turn this back on so we can see where our rock is. There it is. Okay, and let me just think about this for a minute. If I don't want to be stupid, I probably should put the rock on a separate layer. Even though I do have a definite tendency to be stupid, I'm going to hit the G key, turn the opacity up, and then what I'm going to do is actually, you can see again that what the freehand path tool is going to do every time is apply the texture at hand from the brush that's currently selected. So now what I'm going to do is draw the rock. Okay, so now let's turn this off, and now let's think about what's really going on here with the rock. First of all, obviously we need to turn this down somewhat. And to tell you the truth, I think that probably what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually do that and bake it down. I'm just going to commit to it, and then come back into it again with the G key, about half opacity, and just think about the local color and shape and size of the rock. All right, and obviously there's going to be some shadow going on, and then importantly there's also going to be this shadow cast from Tianara, because she's sitting on the rock. Okay, and then if this rock was really here, I suppose the rock would be picking up a little bit of that sunshine that's coming from up here that we talked about earlier. Okay, and then if we really want to have fun with it for no real good reason, since we're not going to see it because she's sitting on the rock, we could take this little dot brush and just kind of What's actually interesting about things like this a lot of times what works nicely is you take a mid-tone color, a color that's right halfway between your light and your dark, and what that does for you is it gives you light, or it gives you dark texture on the light areas and light texture on the dark areas. And then when you zoom out, you know, it looks okay. Now in this case, I'm seeing that I probably want a little bit more specular highlight. So I'm going to get aggressive with it. And just smack those on there. Like I said, we're not going to see them because obviously TNR is sitting on the rock, but I think that'll be okay. Okay, so now question, what about animating those clouds, man? What are you going to do about those clouds, little buddy? Well, that's a great question. What's this layer? Oh yeah, that's our color correction. I'm going to turn that on. I actually think that looks pretty good. But the important thing, we've got this really long shot. Okay, I'm going to Oh, yes, you're correct. About the 90 minutes. OBS was on, technically streaming, for quite some time before the stream actually went live. So as far as how long it's been live, that sounds right. Yeah, a little over 90 minutes. So, cute video. And yeah, cool. How are you scaling your brush? When you're painting, it's really weird because this is one of those things that is simple until you actually have to tell somebody how you did it. I believe I just hit shift and drag. Yeah, that's it. Shift and drag. So here's my pencil, right? Shift, drag. Ta-da. So that's it. How would we want to do this? Well, what I'm going to say is, and by the way, this should be 8 frames a second. If we're going to have a shot that's 6 seconds long, I'm going to show this because it's what actually becomes quite difficult in Krita, but it is very doable. What do I mean by that? Because you're going to have to do your animated keyframes one by one. Okay? Yeah, I'm with you, Amar, on that. The Futurama Nixon video was quite good. Quite good. Okay, so how would you do it? Well, slow push in. 3. Probably about there. So we'll go up to about 40. All right, so I'm going to go to 40. I'm going to say, well, so there's more than one way to do this, but I'm going to hit the A key to animate, and I'm going to hit shift so that it's constrained to a single axis. It's constrained to the X. Okay? So there's your animation, and then the reality is that this would have to be animated and tweened by hand. So it's going to be, and I'm going to actually move these a little bit further, but this would be easier in OpenToonz, it would be easier in Blender, it would be easier everywhere than in Krita. But it can be done. So if we're going to go from 0 to 40, then 20 is going to be the halfway point. So let's just do it that way. So you can see what your halfway point is going to be roughly. And we can keep subdividing. But this is a risky way to do it, honestly. It's actually a very risky way to do it. Because the idea that you're going to actually, see right there is a good example of why it's a risky way to do it. So let's say that setting the key on the extremes turns out to not be the best policy. Okay, let's agree that that's the case. Well, what makes more sense would be to just come up here and add another layer. And this would be if I'm animating almost anything except what I'm actually doing. But what I would what I would typically do is just grab a real bold color like red, and I would just draw lines in here like this, and then, you know, if this is the bottom texture of it, then I would put in indications of where the keys are. The problem is this is 40 frames long. I'm not going to put in 40 indicators. So this makes way more sense for character animation. For something like this that's basically straight ahead animation, you're just going to move something and it's moving in a static manner over time. It makes more sense to just do straight ahead animation like so. And just do that. Just move it. So you're going to spend a few minutes going through and just making these really minuscule changes. And it's frankly a bit tedious. Now, while I'm on the subject, I went into the, that was a little bit too extreme of a move. I went into the Krita Python API. And I mentioned this in a video the other day, but what I learned was that I actually have a script that will grab the current active frame and move it to some degree that you may want to move it. What I haven't done is being baked into the individual frames. I mention that because if you do the same thing with a scaling operation, it doesn't work. So again, I mentioned this the other day, but the Krita Python API is a little bit kludgy, where different things are able to be done in different ways that are not always consistent. I would say the Blender Python API is way more consistent. But if you do what I'm doing here and were to ask yourself, okay, how long did this take me? And again, assuming you don't screw it up. Okay, assuming you don't get the whole thing done and go, oh man, that looks bad, and now I have to do it over anyway, right? Assuming that doesn't happen, the question becomes, well, to add this little secondary animation, how long did it really take me? Well, it's going to take you as long as it takes me to sit here and talk about it. So it might take you maybe 5 minutes. And this gets into, again, why Krita. It is not better. I'm not claiming it's better. It's worse. But to accomplish the same thing in OpenToonz, unless you're doing all your work in OpenToonz, which obviously is a valid approach, then you would have to export your Krita layers, bring them into another program, and animate them. It's probably the smarter way to go in many cases. My only argument is that typically doing that is going to take more than 5 minutes. Well, okay, so Max is asking me why not do it the smart way. Absolutely. You could bring it into Blender OpenToonz. If you're using Tahoma, you could actually, okay, so let's do that. How would you do it? What you do is you'd say, you grab this layer and you'd hit Control C. Okay, let's just stay with it here for a minute and I'll show you. Let's just jump up to here. Let Tahoma run. Come on, Tahoma. You're not going to be acting silly today, are you? Oh, it's going to be on the other screen. Okay. All right, go here and hit Control V. Now, did that work? That does not look like it worked. I probably need to go ahead and create a layer. So I'm going to create a raster layer. Level, not layer. And it's this one. Okay, so we'll just give it a name, blah, blah, blah. And then what should happen is not happening. Why is it not happening? Let's try this one more time. We'll grab this. Actually, I'll hit Select All, Control C, Control V. Doesn't want to work. Doggone it. Okay, well, if things were working, weigh in, Darren, if you want to, because this is how simple it's supposed to be. Usually this works, and actually this kind of makes my own argument for me. A great example of what works every other day, today decides not to work. I can cut and paste in this. Okay, so let's add another layer or level. All right, and let's cut and paste in the clouds. So I'm going to go in here, select all, Control C, paste in the clouds. And for some stupid reason, when I'm pasting in the clouds, they don't paste it. Okay, so this has indeed made my point for me. 9 times out of 10, what I just did would have worked just fine, and it would make way more sense to just animate it in Tahoma. Of course, you have the caveat that you either need to finish up your work in Tahoma, or you've got to render out an image sequence and bring it back into Krita. You can do it either way, but my point is, how long did it take me to animate these clouds? Okay, they're a little bit jittery, but it's not going to matter because when I bring it into Vegas, we're going to have this camera move. We're going to see it zooming in, right? So you're not going to notice a slight jitter in the clouds anyway. Okay, so the other caveat is you bring it into Toonz and you animate it from the beginning point to the end point, and if you didn't go into your Toonz options and make sure you set it to linear interpolation, it's not going to move it smoothly from point A to point B. It's going to do an ease in or an ease out. Okay? So now you're going, oh man, now I got to go into my spreadsheet and I got to change the interpolation on those frames. Well, what I'm saying is that sort of thing happens all the time. It happens all the time where what you intended doesn't quite work the way you intended, and unless you're really committed to doing great work, what you're going to do is you're going to go, well, it's good enough. And you're going to move on. I've done that myself 10 zillion times. But setting all those keys on the clouds took me not even 5 minutes. I think anyone here will agree. But I tried to do it the smart way, bring it into Tahoma. Again, 9 times out of 10, it would have worked fine. Why it didn't today, I don't know. It's, you know, and I'm not going to grok out the reasons why. You could say, well, maybe it's because there's, there's an alpha channel on this. You know, you could ask all kinds of questions about what's wrong with it. The reality is, everything that you could do in terms of cut and pasting from Krita to Tahoma, I have done. It works. It always works. Today's the day it decided not to work. And only on the cloud layer. I kid you not, folks. This sort of stuff happens all the time. And so, do you want to spend your 5 minutes moving the clouds? Or do you want to spend your 45 minutes figuring out why Tahoma didn't decide to work properly today? I'm not cracking on Tahoma. Tahoma's a great program. Obviously, OpenToonz, Tahoma, same thing, more or less. And Blender's even cooler. It's just that in the normal daily workflow, it just doesn't turn out to be that big of a win to be jumping around. It just doesn't. So anyway, I think this is actually done, and I can render this as a image sequence, and then obviously I've got to bring in Tianara. My objective here, I'm going to call this BKGD group. My objective here was to paint the background, not to go ahead and do the animation and add Balder and Tianara to the shot. But I definitely need to do that. The layer blending and the baking layers together and all that stuff that involves layers, that's really quick and easy and intuitive in Krita. You can do it all in OpenToonz, but it's inherently clunky, because you can only really get blending layers if you open up your shot in the schematic and you apply the blending layer modes to the layers, so you only get to see the blending layers when you're in rendered preview mode. So when you're just sitting there painting, you don't get to see that unless you've got another window open that's already in preview mode. So, and I've done it that way. So you're dealing with your levels in OpenToonz and you've got another window open that's not the fast preview, it's actually the rendered preview, so that when you make a change, you can see it. That's not a horrible way to work. You can do that. As you said, you can export it, animate it, re-import it back into Krita. Would the result turn out to be better and or take less time than what you see here? I'll bet you it wouldn't. I'll bet you it wouldn't, especially, like I said, if you got your interpolation wrong. If you had it set to ease in and ease out, which I think is the default, all of a sudden your clouds are going to start moving slowly and build up to speed and then slow back down at the end, which is exactly what you didn't want, because you wanted this seamless, you know, the clouds are just moving all the time, right? That's the idea. So I'm glad you asked the question, though, because it's a really good example of where I've been making the argument here that 5 minutes spent in Krita turns out to be a bigger win than, as I say, 45 minutes dinking around with the other software that ostensibly was going to make it easier or faster to do. So I rest my case, at least for today. Okay, so there's the sketch. I think we're in good shape here, folks. I think this shot is pretty much done. I just need to go ahead and bring in the characters later. So I'm going to save it, and I think it's probably time to sign off. Okay, Max, you're saying, I noticed this image is 1920. You're going to do a camera zoom, should have made a higher resolution. You know what, Max? That's what everybody thinks. And so before I go, I'm going to show you something that's one of the great secrets that no one considers. Because, first of all, my final resolution, and I'm going to explain this in a couple different ways. My final resolution on this show is actually broadcast HD 1280 by 720. That means that ultimately it's going to get up-resed back to full HD. Now, if you're a purist and you don't really necessarily know how things always work in the real world, you're going to think that's a big problem. Oh man, it's got to be high resolution. You should be doing this painting at 4K. That's what you're going to say. Well, I got news for you. Every film that I have released was actually done precisely the way I'm describing here, where I shot the movie in HD, did all my editing in broadcast HD, so I had about a 30% wiggle room to either crop frames or even do animations, and maybe move things around, reframe them a little bit. Sometimes add digital matte paintings, you know, to live action shots. And if I told the distributor, hey, by the way, this is going to be down-resed to broadcast HD and then up-resed back, they would have a cow. They go bananas. No, you can't do that. It's got to be full HD. Blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? In practice, every movie I've ever made, you know, and I always come back to Healed by Grace being a movie that cost me $8,000 to make, and it made $1 million at retail. $1 million. That film was done just the way I just described. It was shot in HD, edited in broadcast HD, and then when we did the final render, we up-resed it back to HD. I say we, it was really me. Why is that not a problem? Well, if you actually look at my timeline here, one of the interesting things about it is if you compare this show to, say, any anime that you might watch, it turns out that all the animes that you can watch look a little bit soft. And in fact, you'll also notice that there's a quick blur on my entire show. I've actually degraded my show by making it a little bit soft. Oh my goodness, why would you do that? Because it actually looks better. Well, when I ultimately deliver this thing, I don't really need to do that. All I really need to do is I can turn off the quick blur and render it as is, because what I can do is render this at broadcast HD and then re-up-res it to standard HD, and that will cause a natural softening of the visuals, which actually looks aesthetically better than if you let it be crisp and sharp. This is something a lot of people don't understand, and it usually comes back to the topic of DPI. Okay? People talk about DPI. People in the industry who talk about DPI almost never even understand what DPI means, meaning dots per inch. Well, don't you have to create that movie poster at 300 dots per inch because it's going to print at 300 dots per inch? If you don't create your poster at 300 dots per inch, it's not going to look good. Okay. But here's the question I ask myself. Okay, I'm going to give you an example here. I'm going to give you a real-world example of what I am talking about, because it's extremely pertinent. Okay? So bear with me for half a second while I look up what I'm looking for here. Graphics. Okay. Bear with me for just a moment. Posters. Here we go. Okay, so deliverables. Okay, so again, bear with me because I'm looking for the SVG files. Assembly, there we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull up this movie poster. Okay, because it's a great example of what I was talking about. So I want to make sure I'm on the right screen here. Okay, I'm not on the right screen. I'm going to jump to this screen. And okay, so here is a poster from my film called Clerical Errors. Well, surprise, surprise, when I did the graphics, I did it at essentially 72 dots per inch. In other words, I did it so that if you look at it at actual size, and you can see it drags a bit. If you look at it at actual size, it's the size of a movie poster if you look at it on a computer screen. Okay, we're live again. Okay, so when a person looks at a movie poster, they do not have their eyeballs 1 inch from the poster. They're typically at least 6 feet away. So what they see when they look at a movie poster looks to them more like this. So visually they're standing a little ways away from it. Well, what I found was if it looks crisp and clear and sharp on a computer screen, then if you upres it to 300 DPI, in other words, you just scale the image for printing, it will be a little softer, true, but it actually will look exactly the same to a person looking at the poster. Why? Because they're 6 to 20 feet away from it, number one, and the point is that at actual visual size, it looks crisp and sharp. So it only looks soft and not high res enough if you're 1 inch away from it. And in practice, you're never 1 inch away from the poster. Okay? And so what I realized was what everybody thinks is a big deal is actually not a big deal at all. And so I was able to create the poster at a lower resolution, which was not as hard on the computer, right? And it looked fine. It printed fine, yada, yada, yada. So this concept of needing high resolution is sometimes you do, but usually you don't. But to be fair, it depends on the situation. It depends on the situation. So to more directly answer your question, what I'm doing here is I'm going to do the image at HD so that I have about a 30% crop range that I can crop this into broadcast HD. Obviously I've done shots where I've done it at higher resolution, but I'm just making the point that usually people think that's a big deal, and it's literally not. It's just not, because it's not something you're going to see anyway. For one thing, consider this as well. This is an establishing shot where the camera's moving in on it. So it's in motion the whole time. That inherently introduces a little bit of blur or distortion, because you're thinking in your mind about where your attention needs to be, that sort of thing. And so, again, the more things are moving, the more forgiving it is as far as resolution goes. If there's going to be any motion blur at all, then all of a sudden it becomes extremely forgiving, right? So just something to think about. Yeah, if you're working for ILM, yeah, you're probably going to be doing this shot at 8K. Yeah, if you're working for ILM, and it's going to be in a 3D virtual set, and you're dealing with a $200 million movie budget. Yeah. My movie budget is much less. Okay. So anyway, Amar's weighing in. Yeah, unless it's a collector's item and just for promo, the resolution is generally good at 150. I actually think that's what I did on the movie posters, is I ultimately split the difference between 72 and 300. So I think I did them actually at 300 or at 150. I understand now. It doesn't matter if it's because they look the same when viewed. Well, exactly. And by the way, another thing, Max, you want to consider is most of the people who ever watch this show are going to be watching it on either a phone, or they're going to be watching it on a computer screen that they are at least 8 feet away from. So it's either going to be shrunk way down, which is going to tend to make it look sharper, or they're going to be a ways away from it. So if you're really picky about resolution, you're only picky at resolution if your eyeball is 1 inch away from the surface, which it never is. Ever. See? Hence, back when HD was a new thing and Robert Rodriguez was doing some tests with it, they actually, the industry, this would have been the late 90s, and the industry absolutely would have insisted that there's no way that HD can compete with real film, and there's definitely no way that broadcast HD 1280 by 720 can compete with real film. Robert Rodriguez did some experiments. He showed his results to George Lucas, and everyone agreed that the 1280 by 720 looked better and sharper than the film. This was at the dawn of HD, when it was a new thing. So they went with it. The original, I'm pretty sure that the Spy Kids sequel was actually shot in broadcast HD. Don't quote me on that. It might have been full HD, but I don't think it was. So anyway, okay, Enio-san's got to go, so see you later, bro. Huge posters for the highway. Happy New Year's. Yeah, it really is. It's tomorrow's New Year's Eve. Man, crazy stuff. Okay, so that's enough of a rant about resolution. We'll leave it at that for now. And I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off, guys. It's been a good stream today. Gotten a lot of work done. Probably do some of the Asher stuff offline because it's just kind of duplicating more of what I did before. But, you know, hey, we got this shot done. Got the background painting done. It's looking good. So I'm just going to have to do some cut and paste here and rock and roll. So with that, I will say sayonara. As you guys know, there will be more later. Everybody have a great day, and I'll see you soon.